What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the laser attachments in Modern Warfare 2. I'm going to be going through every single one of the stats that these lasers impact and comparing them all so you guys can make the most informed decisions possible while creating your loadouts. And with this, we have 5 important characteristics to cover with these laser attachments. We have aiming stability, aim down sight speed, sprint out speed, hip fire, and then finally, the visibility of the laser and what situations the laser will be visible in, because this is actually a little bit confusing if you just look at the menus. And without further ado, let's just hop right into it, and let's start it off with aiming stability. So this is basically just how much your sight is going to be swaying around while aiming down sight. This affects not only the speed, but also the magnitude of how much the dot moves. And as we can see here with the 1 milliwatt PEC laser, which is the one that has no stated downsides, it just helps with aiming stability, you can see it definitely slows that sway down quite a bit, and the magnitude is also cut down a little. So the next one, this is the Choreo LEZ44, and this one definitely gives us even better aiming stability than the previous one. After that, we have the FSS OLEV laser, and this one seems to be very comparable to the Choreo one that I just looked at there. They're very, very similar when it comes to this. They both help quite a bit with aiming stability. After that one, we have the Canted Vibro .7. Now, it's worth noting with this, I had to zoom in extra because you can't use an optic with this, so this is just what the laser is swaying. And it actually does help a lot with our aiming stability, but it's also less important with this because you typically won't be using this for really long ranges. But then finally, we have the DSX flashlight, so not a laser, but a flashlight. And this one also helps a little bit with our aiming stability, and it is a noticeable improvement here. Overall, the 2 standouts in this area are the Choreo LEZ44 and the FSS OLEV. Both of these seem very comparable when it comes to aiming stability, and they help quite a bit here. As for the next stat that I wanted to look at with the laser sights, this is hip fire. And there are 4 different lasers that help with our hip fire. And I did all the testing on this with the Canted Vibro .7. This one improves the diameter of our hip fire spread by about 10%. Then we have what I just like to call the Doctor Laser Box. This one improves it by 17.5%. And then after that, for both the Corvus PEC Beam 5 as well as the FTAC Grimline Laser, both of these seem to improve our maximum hipfire spread by 25%. So that is a very noticeable improvement, and those are definitely the best options if you're going for a full-on hipfire build. As for the next important stat to look at here, this is the sprint out time, or how long it takes to fire after coming out of a sprint. And keep in mind with these values, they are hand tested, therefore there is some rounding involved here, and they may not line up 100% flawlessly with the coded data that we don't currently have access to. But I did test them multiple times with multiple guns, and these are at least decently accurate, or at least accurate enough for you to make some informed decisions. And we can see here with the FSS OLEV laser, that improves our sprint out speed by 10%. The Canted Vibro .7 improves our sprint out speed by 5%. Then with the Grimline laser, this one is a 10% improvement. The Luminate 44 flashlight is a 5% improvement. And then finally, the best improvement for sprint out time is going to be our DSX Flash 90 flashlight. And this one improves our sprint out times by 15%. Now finally, when it comes to stats that directly affect the handling of the gun, let's have a look at our aim down sight times. Again, these are hand-tested values, so they may not line up perfectly with the coded values, but they should allow you to make some good decisions at least. And it turns out there's only 4 lasers that directly impact our ADS time, at least on the regular guns in the game. And starting it off with the Schlager PEC Box 4, this is the one with no stated downsides, so this one's just pure upsides, but it only gives you about a 5% faster aim down sight speed. Then the Choreo LEZ44 improves our ADS speed by 7.5%. The best laser for aim down sight speed improvement is the FSS OLEV laser with a 10% improvement. And then finally, that Canted Vibro .7 will give us a roughly 5% faster aim down sight time, just like we saw with the Schlager PEC Box 4. And so far, just looking at this, if you're looking to improve your handling as much as possible, something that surprised me a bit here, the FSS OLEV seems to be your best option because it not only gives you the best improvement to your aim down sight time, it also gives you a very solid improvement to your sprint out times. So that's definitely a laser that I'm going to be using a whole lot more often than before I did this testing. So while that wraps it up for the stats that directly impact the gun itself, there is something really important that we still have to go through here, and this is when these lasers are going to be visible and how visible they're going to be. Because if you just look at the stated pros and cons, and if you read the descriptions, you may end up being a little confused by the different statements in there. Some of them seem like they're the same thing, but they're actually different. So let's just dive right into this. And the first type we're going to look at is the ones that have no stated cons, but if you read the description for them, it will say laser activates when aiming. So that seems really confusing. Is there a laser activated or not? Now, it turns out with these two lasers, the enemy will be able to see your laser, but first off, only when aiming down sight, as it states. If you're not aiming, there's no visible laser whatsoever. And second, the key distinction here compared to some of the other lasers that do have a stated con is enemies won't be able to see the actual laser beam. They will only see that glowing laser in your hand when you aim down sight. So it may help them spot you if you're aiming directly at them and they otherwise wouldn't see you. But if you're aiming across a lane perpendicular to them, they're not going to be able to see that laser. As for the next style of lasers, these are the ones that do have a stated con, and that stated con says laser visible in ADS. With these ones, the enemy will be able to see the actual laser beam when you're aiming down sight. So if you are aiming across a lane or something, even if they can't see you directly, they will potentially be able to spot that laser and therefore realize that you're pre-aiming that lane and maybe they don't want to be peeking that corner. So these are the types of lasers where you definitely have to be a bit more careful when you're aiming down sight. As for the next one, this one's just unique on its own. This is the Canted Vibro.7. With this one, it just says laser visible to enemies. It doesn't specify while aiming down sight or while hip firing. So I did the testing with this one, and it turns out it's just always on, and you can see that laser beam. So this doesn't deactivate when you stop aiming down sight or when you do aim down sight. This thing is just always active for you, and therefore that is a pretty big downside to using this. Enemies are going to see when you're approaching, whether you're aim down sight or not. As for the next style of lasers, these are the ones that have no stated cons. However, when you read the description, it does say laser is active at the hip. And with this, once again, the enemies will not be able to see the actual laser beam itself, but when you're not aiming down sight, they will be able to see that laser just attached to your gun. So that may allow those players to spot you a little bit easier. And also, it's worth noting with this, you're still projecting a dot onto whatever surface that's currently in the middle of your screen when you're not aiming down sight with these. So there is a chance that even if you're around a corner, they may see that dot projected on a wall that they can see, and therefore that may give away your position as well. As for the next type of laser, this one has a stated con that says laser visible at hip. And with this one, the enemy will be able to see your actual laser beam. However, only when you're not aiming down sight. The moment you aim down sight, that laser turns off. And finally, let's get into the flashlights in this and their visibility. The first type of flashlight will say that the flashlight is visible in ADS, so this only turns on when you aim down sight. It turns off completely when you're not aiming, and you can just see what it looks like there. It definitely projects some light, could make it easier to spot you. Also, if you are hugging a corner fairly close, they can see the light being projected around that corner, so they may be able to prepare for you by seeing that light source. But finally, on a similar note here, there's another flashlight that just states that the flashlight is visible to enemies. And with this, as you may have expected, it looks just like the previous one. However, this one never turns off. Doesn't matter if you're aiming or not, that flashlight is always on for you. And with that, that's finally going to wrap it up for today's video on the laser attachments in Modern Warfare 2. And essentially, my conclusion here is the laser sights are usually really good options on weapons. This is one of the attachment slots where I'd almost always recommend throwing a laser on, whether that's one of the lasers with no stated downsides. That's always just a nice benefit to your gun, while only making it maybe slightly easier for the enemies to spot you because that laser on your gun is visible, even though the laser beam isn't visible. But another laser that really stands out to me here that I really like, and I will be including on a lot of my setups now, is the FSS OLEV laser. This one does project a laser while aiming down sight, so you have to be aware of that, but it just helps a lot with not only aiming stability, but also aim down sight speed, and also on top of that, your sprint out speed. And that makes this a clear winner if you are going for a more mobile build that also has extra stability attached to it. As for a hip fire build, if I'm trying to be as accurate as possible firing from the hip, I'm definitely going to be leaning toward the FTAC Grimline laser because this not only significantly improves your hip fire spread, it also improves your sprint out speed, which is excellent because you typically want the best sprint out time possible when going for a hip fire build. And with that, this is where I'm curious to hear from you guys in those comments down below. What do you think about the laser attachments in Modern Warfare 2 so far, especially now that you've seen some actual data surrounding them? Are you going to be making any changes on your class setups, or not so much? Just let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.